After that, a series of reports continued to come right up to 2009. So you had a confirmation from your own intellectuals about the scenario, about the condition in which you were living. So there was this sense of being excluded, there was a sense of loss of dignity, there was a sense of a political malaise and an economic failure, but there was no instrument or idea available to you at that time as to how to respond. Scholars will talk for several years and a few decades as to why something happened in Tunisia on a particular day, why it expanded and became so powerful, in what circumstances did it lead to the departure of a particular potentate who had ruled the country for nearly 40 years. But then that actually happened. I have lived in the region for 25 years and in 8 countries, served in 8 or 9 countries. I was totally unprepared for the Arab Spring. When the first agitations began in Tunisia in December 2010, I took no interest in the self-immolation of Bouazizi. I became engaged with the Arab Spring when Ben Ali actually landed in Jeddah, where I was ambassador. And therefore, the Tunisians got rid of their problem and Ben Ali became my problem because he landed in my jurisdiction. And I therefore had to really give up everything else that was interesting to me then and focus on this extraordinary development that had taken place in front of my eyes. And therefore, one struggled to understand. That what had happened. Something was quite dramatic, indeed unprecedented. Bouazizi burned himself. There is no precedent in Islam for self-immolation. Burning a body is entirely forbidden in Islam. A burnt person has no place in paradise ever, however exemplary his life. And this was the first act of defiance against the autocrat in recent times, an act of self-immolation. That means that the political statement that emerged from this act was entirely secular in character. And the aspirations that were then articulated were entirely secular in character. In all the agitations that then emerged in Tunisia and in Egypt, there was no reference to Islam. There was no reference to Israel. There was no reference to the United States. All the demands were for freedom, dignity, and democracy. Truly, the West Asian people and the North African people had globalized. They had pulled themselves out of the confines of West Asia. All their earlier agitations had been Arab and Islamic in character. All their revolutions and attempts at change had taken place within a West Asian context. For the first time in West Asian history, the agitations went out of the confines of this region and demanded access to and aspired to what are called universal values of mankind. This began with the act of immolation and the departure of Zainuddin Ben Ali. After that, a series of events have taken place, and I will then look at them with you as they have evolved. What is the scenario today? The first impact of Tunisia was felt in Egypt, when day after day, for 3 to 4 weeks, you found people gathering at one place, estimated at nearly 500,000 people, gathering and demanding the ouster of their potentate. The strongest man in the Arab world, Hosni Mubarak, Air Force General, had ruled the country for more than 30 years, ruled it with an iron hand. Nobody had ever questioned his rule before. And here were 500,000 people, unafraid, gathering at one spot and saying you must go, and then they articulated demands for freedom, dignity, and democracy. These were the common demands. And ultimately this led to his ouster. So he is out of the picture. Then it went to another place. There have been a series, let us look at each of them. In the case of Yemen, there were agitations once again against Ali Abdullah Saleh. He had come to power in 1979. Very few people in the early days had given much chance to him to survive. His previous two presidents had been assassinated. And when I served in Sana'a from 79 to 81, he had just taken over. Everybody said in Sana'a that this guy is going very shortly. He never went anywhere until 2011. At 2011, he was ousted as a result of continuous public agitation. Libya is the place which is slightly different. Well, while there was a certain amount of local agitation, certain degree of local agitation, it really, the actual regime change occurred due to Western intervention in alliance with the Gulf country, in alliance with the GCC country. But I will dilate on this in a short while. The other place where again you had popular agitation was Bahrain. If you were to look at a world map, you would not spot Bahrain. If you looked at the map of the Gulf, you would still need a magnifying glass. But this little country in the Gulf was in the vanguard of aspirations for change. And again then, thousands of people gathered at a symbolic monument known as the Pearl Square and agitated for change. And the government seemed to respond. They had political parties of different hues. It was said that the Crown Prince was engaged in dialogue, and on a certain day it was said that on 14th March there would be a substantial, there would perhaps be a substantial dialogue between the Crown Prince representing his father, the ruler, and the agitators in front of him. On the night of 13th, 14th March, very dramatically, Saudi armed forces crossed the King Fahd Causeway, entered Manama, occupied Pearl Square, and each and every demonstrator was arrested and the square was cleared. In due course, the Bahraini government in its wisdom removed Pearl Square. Pearl Square had been originally set up as a symbol of cooperation of the GCC countries. So they destroyed their own symbol in order to ensure that the agitators don't have a symbol of their own. And Pearl Square was gone, and all the agitators were then in prison. They were incarcerated, and the promise of political dialogue came to a very, very dramatic end. What happened after that? The Saudis then stated that this agitation in Bahrain was Shia in character, and that it had been instigated by the Iranians. And Iranians had hegemonic intentions across the region, and they needed to be confronted because all good Muslims, being Sunni, they would not accept Shia hegemony upon them, and they would not tolerate interference of Iran in their political system. With all respect to Saudi Arabia, I must point out there was nothing Shia about the Iranian agitation, about the Bahraini agitations. The Bahrainis had demanded freedom, dignity, and democracy. Not one of them articulated anything which could be uniquely Shia in character. But Shia constitutes 70% of Bahrain. And therefore, obviously, their numbers would be large. Secondly, in Bahrain, the Shia are an underclass, in the sense they live, there is a bias, there is a prejudice against them. They don't have the best jobs in the country, they have poorer education, the benefits of Bahraini success have not percolated to them. If you go to, say, Manama, and you were to drive around, you would see the contrast between the places where the empowered community lives, the Sunni community, and the shanty towns and ghettos where the Shia live. When I passed through Manama and drove through, my colleague from the embassy said, this is the Saudi town, these are the Shia townships. So it was truly, they are badly treated and they are excluded from the mainstream of national life. Having said this, the agitation at Pearl Square was not Shia in character. But the Saudi concern was that if you had real change, this would inevitably lead to the empowerment of Shia, and that was something that Saudi Arabia could not accept at all. because this would be an empowerment of Shia within the Arab world. It would have implications for the Shia community in Saudi Arabia itself, and could in due course encourage the Iranians, who are already strategically well placed in terms of their domination over Iraq and Syria, would have one more area right in the heart of the GCC, which would be subservient to, or at least influenced by, Iranian strategic interests. So a strategic competition has been set up between Saudi Arabia and Iran. It manifests itself not only bilaterally in terms of name calling by the Saudi media on a daily basis about Iran's hegemonic intentions and its desire to convert people into Shia or whatever, to put up Shia power in the region, but it also has other theaters where it manifests itself, that is Iraq, Syria, Lebanon, and Palestine. So this is where we are. In the case of other agitations, the principal area where the Arab Spring is today being challenged, or rather facing a significant challenge, is Syria. In the case of Syria, Syria has a regime which has been central to the Arab struggle against Israel. But it is at the same time has strong strategic links with Iran. Therefore, Syria is seen as the outreach, the strategic outreach of Iran onto the Mediterranean. Syria and Iran together also support the Hezbollah.